And welcome back to the Dean Obeidallah Show. We're live here Friday, June 23rd. It's third hour on Friday, which can only mean one of many things. But relevant to the show, what it means is it's what just happened. So we look back at the insanity of the week and we get three people, all returning champions, I'd like to say. Chanel Omari is back, stand-up comic, actress, writer, producer, host of the popular comedic pop culture podcast, Chanel in the City. She's been featured in a whole bunch of shows. Chanel, nice to see you. How is everything going?
I'm good. Thank you for having me, Dean. This
Chanel's
is awesome.
back. Also back, Brian Wall is back, stand-up comic, recently was part of the off-Broadway show musical, The Wizard of Friendship, co-host of My Favorite Friendship podcast, and an album he was part of this off-Broadway show, just got released today. Brian, what's the name of it? Welcome back. What's the name of the album?
The album is Lou Berger and the Wizard of Friendship. It's the cast recording. And then also we have a special guest, Wayne Brady is on 2 tracks. We also have Alex Brightman and Deshaun Wesley, who is the host of HBO's Legendary. So
that's great.
It's a great record. You can get it wherever you stream your albums or where people get music now.
That's great. Congratulations on that. And Scott Blakeman, my buddy, just back from being a smash hit in France because he was in Paris having fun. I saw he did a show there. We co-created Stand Up for Peace together. He's been on 30, 40 national TV appearances doing political comedy. And do you still do the podcast with you and Tom? Or did you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's called Getting Through This with Tom and Scott. We just did our 605th episode all in one day. We had a lot of free time. And I know we've been doing it since April of 2020, and it's a lot of fun. And yeah, it's great to be back from Paris. I always wanted to say that. I did 2 shows there, actually, and did more spots in Paris than I've done in Manhattan lately. So I might spend more time there.
Who books Paris? I gotta go.
I'll fill you in on everything.
Okay, I'm going. We're gonna, like every comedian, anytime something happens, you're like, who books that?
Yeah.
So a lot to cover. Let's start with something actually tomorrow is going to mark the anniversary. It's 1 year since the GOP religious fanatics on the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, taking a fundamental right away from women that they had for 50 years. And now, as a result, in 14 GOP states, there is no abortion, even in the case of rape or incest, because they're barbarians. And in a few other states, it's at 6 weeks. So Chanel, since you are a woman, let's start with you and the idea that you used to have reproductive freedom, and then you literally lost that right because people sitting in robes on the right, primarily appointed by Donald Trump, took it away. What's your reaction?
Well, first of all, I'm highly triggered, as all women would be. I think first of all, I was saying this earlier on before, they were, imploding this on us. And I was thinking, this is crazy. We don't have as many rights as we did back in 1973. And really in the 1970s and 80s, that's when rights were really progressing. And we thought it was going to take a turn to equality with men. And now that we're regressing, like, to me, that's really scary because it is our body and our choice. And by the way, having this on us, this pressure, doesn't mean women aren't going to try to find a way to get an abortion. It doesn't mean that women aren't going to try to find a way to protect themselves, if they, God forbid, get raped, right? And they're saying that doesn't even, it's just, they're very contradicting themselves. They're contradicting themselves by saying, we have this morale that's why we don't want you to get an abortion. But by the way, if you get raped, you still can't get an abortion. So it's just really upsetting. It's really upsetting. And we have to take a stand against it. And we have to push as women to keep having our rights, because let me tell you something, me having no rights, you do not want to see me on this planet not having rights, because that's the scariest thing. Seeing a woman in 2023 not having rights, that's the scariest thing. That's all I'm going to say.
Having less rights today, literally, than you did in 1973. And in keeping with that, we're going to mute you for the rest of the show. I'm surprised.
Where do you live, Dean?
Just to keep it consistent with you having less, you had more rights earlier in the show, but later in the show, you're muted. I'm sorry. And I'll ask the men if you're allowed to speak at any time, just like the Supreme Court as a rule. So Brian, what's your reaction to the idea? Because I want to make a point that it affects women directly, but also affects men as well, as spouses, as people dating someone, as a loved one, a sister. Like, it affects us. It's a women's issue in one way, but it's a human rights issue in a bigger sense because it's a loss of a right. So Brian, what's your reaction to this?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's just a pervasive fear throughout the country right now. People are terrified. You make one mistake and then your life is changed forever. And that type of fear is affecting every type of social interaction we have. How many articles have you read that we're lonelier than ever? How many guys do I know that can't get a date because nobody wants to date. Nobody wants to go out and meet anybody because they're terrified. They're just terrified. And we're living in a state where we are ruled by a minority that is, ruling over us with this Christo-fascist view of controlling everything that we say, that we do, and that type of fear makes us so easy to control. I don't know how we can overcome it. It's so scary.
We have to keep working, and the sense of loneliness really did change during a lot. Was heightened during COVID. I realized during COVID that my girlfriend's not just my best friend; she's my only friend. I have no friends, like no one else cared. Scott's okay, sort of my friend.
Absolutely.
So Scott's my buddy. Or so I have two friends, but Hen is my really close friend. She's the only that really cared. So Scott, we've talked about this a lot in politics, and now the GOP is literally taking America backwards. It's not status quo. It's going backwards.
Well, not only it's backwards, there's only 3 other countries since 1994 that have backtracked on abortion: El Salvador, Poland, and Nicaragua. So not in great company, even though they're great. The people are great, but their governments are horrible. And I was reading earlier too, up until 1880, abortion was just considered a commonplace in America. Even the Catholic Church didn't have issues with abortion, even at conception or early stages of pregnancy. So this has really evolved. And, I hate how Republicans call themselves conservative. First of all, it's not conservative. A true conservative would say, no, the government should stay out of our bedrooms, should stay out of women's reproductive rights. So they're not conservative. And then they call themselves pro-life. Well, more women are dying now than ever because if you can't get an abortion or you can't get, the care you need, you'll get severe medical diseases or die. And that's happened. And of course, the Chanel said, people will find ways to have abortions, but it'll be back alleys again. And I just saw a great documentary about Chicago in the 1970s, or these wonderful women activists who gave abortions then. And now we're way before those times. So we've gone backwards. And again, it doesn't reflect the majority view of this country. The majority wants a woman's right to choose.
Yeah, there was a new Gallup poll that just came out this week, record high. 69% of Americans believe that women should have the right to an abortion, at least in the first 3 months. That's a record high. It's actually gone up in the whole thing. It's also interesting that, Brian, you mentioned like Christo-fascism and stuff. I have many Democratic members of Congress on who will never use terms like Christian nationalism when it really is academically getting rid of the wall between church and state and saying, here's my religion, we're going to make it law, is Christian nationalism, but they'll never mention that. And I try to go, can you at least say religious fascism or religious supremacy? Because we're all minority faiths, right? Chanel, Brian, and Scott, you're all Jewish. I'm Muslim. And my group was accused of the ones who wanted to impose Sharia law. We're like, what are you talking about? We don't want to impose our religion. It was always them projecting because they knew. So Brian, how much do you think Democrats at least touch on the religious component, or do you think that they'll be too timid to ever mention that these are Christian supremacists or at least religious fanatics?
I think it'll be at least another decade before people become comfortable with that. Right. And it's wild because we as a country, what was it? John Adams signed the Treaty of Tripoli to say that we weren't a Christian nation, so that we could trade with Muslim nations. This is not a new idea, but because we've become so religiously conservative, and we've allowed these people who lost the Civil War to think that they have an equal seat at the table. These guys are losers. These are losers, and all they've done is think that they're winners, and they've just failed their way to the top because we just let them.
Ryan brings up the Treaty of Tripoli from 1797. You get a lot of points because I've talked about that years ago when I had these right-wing bigots saying things about Muslims and this country's a Christian nation. And I would bring up this Treaty of Tripoli when it's actually in writing where he said, we're not a Christian nation, so we have no problem with dealing with Mohammedans, like Muslims, my people. And I'm like, that's John Adams, folks. He was the second president, the first vice president. He sort of was a founding father. Like he would have known if this was to be a Christian nation. So it's remarkable. Chanel, is this religious oppression on some level by, and it's not mainstream Christians, it's really the evangelical conservative white ones that are really pushing this. Is on some level, it is religious supremacy that they're saying, this is my religion, now you all have to live by it?
That's what I'm going to say. I don't think this is a Muslim thing, a Jewish thing, or a Christian religion if you take all those religions, first of all, we all have a lot of similarities in it.
Sure.
It's believing in one God and having the freedom of choice. So already that negates the fact that we have no freedom of choice. And to me, I feel it's their own religion they're making up, which is the government religion, or white supremacy, where it's white supremacy is very different than a good Christian or a good Catholic or a good Muslim or a good Jew. We all know that. In Judaism, we don't pressure to say, hey, if you have an abortion, you're going to hell or you're doing this. I think it's like what Brian and Scott and you are saying, it's a way to control us. And if we don't stop, and by the way, men will help us change the narrative. If more men march with us and say, hey, it is their body, it is their choice, this does affect us too, we're not going to have this happen because these women are going to go behind our backs. And like Scott said, there's going to be more medical issues and more horror stories. And then what? The country is at a loss. No matter what, we're at a loss. So I think when you give somebody the freedom to choose, you have more peace and you have more people coming together and less chaos. And that's where I feel like this is their own religion they're creating. And I think they're trying to stick by it and put it on us to say, hey, this is the religion. This is the way of God or the way of the universe. But it's not. It's dictatorship. It's honestly scary. It's scary.
Exactly. And also they're not really religious. That's the key. A
Right.
true religious Christian, a religious Jew. And sadly, look, being Jewish, there are some of us in the ultra-Orthodox community who are, racist. And in Israel now, there's parties that are essentially, white supremacist parties and anti-Arab and anti-Muslim. So all religions have this, but they're not the most religious. Just because you don't drive on the Sabbath doesn't make you a better Jew. If you have to be compassionate to all people, so these people don't represent religion. And look, the Southern Baptist Church now is kicking women pastors out. That's this is, Jesus was a man of peace. All people, Muhammad, all people from the great religions were people of peace. So these people are perverting religion. In the name of religion, they're taking away our rights. And they're not religious people. They're just bad people.
I like that. And Chanel, I couldn't agree with you more that it's not about they're finding tenets in their faith, because there's nothing about abortion in the Bible. It's the idea of they're just looking for a way to control people. And like the Taliban does with perverting my faith, they'll say, well, this is what it says in our religion. Like, well, it doesn't actually say it anywhere. You just interpret it any way you want. And it's about controlling people. But they know by invoking religion, it's very powerful.
But it's right. It's up to us. It's up to us also to educate, like what we are all doing now. That's maybe like the Taliban. That's an extremist group within the Muslim community. Okay. Or the Jewish. There's also terrorists or extremists within the Jewish religion. You know what I mean? Like the Zionists who are ruthless, let's say, or the Christians. But at the end of the day, that's what's so scary, that we have to really push that wall and say, no, we're not going to abide by your religion. And there's no reason to regress when we've been progressing all these years and we've been making changes,
Well, this Supreme Court has just banned pork in America. I'm sorry, folks, because Jews and Muslims, at least technically, are not supposed to. Look, I get it. People do, but let's just have some fun with them. We have Chanel Omari, Brian Wohl, and Scott Blakeman. So let's shift gears to something that you could not miss for an entire week. And it was a sad ending at the end. I was rooting for them to find the guys in the submarine, but the ship left. It was, sadly enough, going to see the Titanic, a horrific tragedy. It ended up being a tragedy in its own right. And Ocean Gate's submersible Titan, it looks like now about 90 minutes into the ship, when they lost communications, is when the submersible imploded, according to other things. So I think it was amazing. It was everywhere. And look, I could bring up the fact there was hundreds of migrants killed and who died in a ship at the same time in Greece, and I didn't get the coverage. But at the same time, I didn't bemoan the coverage of this. I just wish they gave a little coverage to that. But at the end of it, I ended up rooting for, I don't care they were rich people. I was hoping they'd be found alive. And there was this kind of collective, we're all experiencing this together, but it was manufactured, oddly enough, by the media to get us to care. Because if they didn't cover it, we would have been like, oh, that's sad. But Chanel, so what was your reaction to seeing week-long coverage we couldn't miss for days about the submersive, and just your reaction to the actual result of it all?
All right. Well, this obviously I'm a stand-up comic, so I'm going to make a joke because this,
Sure.
I'm not trying to be insensitive to the Titanic and the history, but the thing is, why the hell would you get into some marine, like really, and go and see the place or the history where is untouchable and sunk, the Titanic. You know what I mean? Like for me, it's a cool idea, but if somebody told me to get in there and just to see it, I know that there's that, like, my death is awaiting. You know what I mean? Like you have to be a little bit. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. Honestly, that was my reaction when I was seeing them. Like, these poor people. Yes, I can't believe it, but what was going on through their head to go and see that? And also with, I think because like the whole James Cameron thing, which I know we'll get into, but
Yeah.
how he says he's going to dive. That's the problem with celebrities. They don't take ownership of, like, when they say things, people take it to heart. And that might have not been exactly what he did. Also, if he did dive in to check some of these things, I'm sure he had major security and major divers that were professionals that helped him. These other people don't have that with them, right? I mean,
Well, no, there were like 5 people on a little
Like-
ship, and they look. I guess on some level, it's like taking a
huge
balloon
risk.
to go see the Hindenburg crash site, and then you crash there, and you're like, "Oh, this is horrible! Like, what happened?" But it's less. It's still a risk of your life. But this is, they have to sign, like, on the front page. I was just reading, someone went on the cruise last year on the like 3 places where it says you could die. You have to sign, like,
Right.
granting a release for death. And I would have been like, at death 1, I would have been like, I don't think I'm going to do this, because there's 3 deaths on the front page.
unless
mean,
it was on their bucket list, right? Like some people are like, you know what, this is a great risk. I know I might die, but maybe this is a great way to go out. Like, you never know but I mean, listen, that's not a joke either. I mean, it's not funny.
No, I
when
understand.
people
No,
pass
you're
away.
right. For some of these adventurers, some
it's-
adventurers go to the climb a mountain knowing they might die, whatever cave, whatever it's called. Brian, how many deaths have to be on a disclaimer that you're signing on the front page for you to go like, these are just one too many death warnings for me?
For me, I don't really get into that stuff, but people skydive every day. So I don't
Right.
think this is that far out. I think what really united us as a globe is this is really the first time we've seen rich people face consequences since the guy that invented the Segway rode his Segway off a cliff. Like
that's a good point.
we just haven't seen rich people face any consequences. I know we are seeing Donald Trump maybe dance around that, but we also know he's not rich. So like this, we need to see rich people face consequences for their decisions. We're already all terrified about making a mistake because we can't get an abortion anymore. Now, we know rich people can make mistakes and money will solve their mistakes. Well, here's one time it didn't happen. And I think
Sure.
that is something that has fascinated the globe.
That's actually that did. Scott, for you, I mean, would you, since we live in the reality show world, would you say to Donald Trump, look, you have a shot like the Running Man, like you have a shot at freedom, but you have to take the submersible to the bottom of the Titanic. Remember the Running Man with Schwarzenegger, and the only way he gets free is like to fight all these different bad guys, and then he gets free at the end. So I would do a Trump Running Man. I think Richard Dawson, who was the host of that. Chanel, you're probably too young for the Running Man. I don't know if you saw it. It's
Oh,
on
of
cable.
course I know the Running Man.
Oh, it's on
yeah.
cable. Like, I would be like, for Trump, okay, we'll give you a Running Man. We have all these villains that wait for him, and he beats them all. I'm like, okay, you go free. And maybe one of them is going on this submersible to see the Titanic. Like, you know what? He won, or he lost and God took him, or the devil more specifically took him. Scott, so what is your thought in all seriousness?
Well, I'm having a slightly more boring take, but in the sense, I mean, I hear what Brian's saying, but I really think that no rich person deserves to die because they're rich. And these were people who loved what they did. They were very experienced, a lot of them. And I would never have done it. It's very risky. They knew it was risky. Certainly we should tighten regulations and look into the safety issues. But, this country now, we've become so hardened, whether it's Hunter Biden being arrested or whether it's, the commentary after this disaster, like, Jesse Waters on Fox saying it's wokeism, or Crenshaw saying, failure of leadership. Why can't people just say, what a horrible tragedy. These people died. They have families. We're really sorry about it. And I mean, maybe that's ridiculously Pollyanna-ish, or whatever the male version of Pollyanna is. But I think we've become very crass and hardened in this, maybe not this country, but the world, but just to say, wow, that's really sad. The same way we were with the Challenger. I remember watching that, and nobody, I don't know if it was pre-Fox, whatever, but nobody was snarky about it. It was just a horrible tragedy, and that's what this was. And it was sad. It's no one's fault. I mean, yes, there were some safety issues, but people knew about it.
Right.
Well, the same way if a plane crashes, it's
Right.
a fault, but you can't plan on that. So I just think it was very sad. And again, I never have had this feeling that rich people deserve something.
I don't think Brian said rich people should die. He was like half joking about accountability.
Well,
Yeah,
no,
can I
I don't
add
mean
to
that.
Just so
But I don't
clear.
No, but
think
I
I've never been.
do.
Yeah, rich people. Look, there's good rich people, there's bad rich people, there's good poor people, bad rich people, good middle class. So I just think it's sad, and hopefully
I still
it
stick
won't
to my
happen.
Donald Trump running man. It's either trial or running man. He's going to get that. I see the judge like, look, we're going to show you a clip from the running man. This is your choice. Do this, whatever. And to clear, Brian was just about accountability, and he was being playful about it.
Can I say something also about that? Because with Brian, with the rich people, I've grown around, Long Island with a lot of privilege and rich people. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, it's more of like, they think they're invincible. So I don't think maybe, they're not thinking all these greater risks. They're like signing the paper, they might die. But I think a rich person would be like, oh, even if I die, this is still a cool thing to do. And I think maybe that's right where the consequences don't lie. Like they don't think anything's ever going to happen to them. That's where I think the stigma of rich people lies to me. The stigma of like, I'm invincible. Nothing will ever happen to me because nothing has happened to me. And sadly, this is like, it's out of anyone's control,
So Brian, let me ask you, like you're on Fox News. So Brian, Scott has said you want rich people to die. Why do you want rich people to die? And is it only white rich people, or are you okay with black rich people dying as well? Let's go to, no, we're going to take a break. And then no. So Brian, what was your reaction? I mean, you respond, please.
I'm sorry you felt that way, but yeah, I know I don't want them to die, but I do think that the Globe was fascinated as to would these people suffer consequences for taking this hubris-filled risk. And we've seen rich people with plenty of hubris get away with so many things, and they're able to make mistakes and not suffer any consequences. And here we saw people suffer consequences. All their money, all their technology could not stop them. And here we are tempting nature, who is so much stronger than anything we as humans can do. And we're always wondering, can we get past it? Can this person with this much money be able to conquer nature? And in the end, in this case, no, nature won.
And by the way, like, I don't know what kind of risk takers you are, but to me, like the risk, I won't even take, like, if the salsa expires the next day, I won't buy it. Like, what if I don't bring it home and I eat it in time?
Anything underwater.
Right. Well, nothing underwater, like, but salsa, I'm like, I'm not eating, like, because I don't know how does salsa turn? What kind of acids in my stomach from this? I'm like, nah. And chicken, forget, like, anything like, I'm like, no.
Dean, are you sure you're not Jewish?
I'm Semitic because I'm Arab, but, but I'm neurotic. I am very neurotic. Scott talks about his act as a whole thing about, what is it about Jewish drug users, Scott?
Oh, just they were too neurotic to be drug users. Like I'd buy the heroin. Like, if the seal is broken, is it still good? Does it keep? Can I freeze it? Is it kosher for Passover? It says June 3rd. Is that used by? Did it expire? No, I do that all the time. I just threw out mayonnaise from I don't know. I mean, I just Google it. They would say, don't worry about it. But I just throw things out constantly. So yeah, look. I mean, but there are these, and again, I didn't mean to be hard on you, Brian, on that. And because as you know, there are great adventurers and risk takers who are middle class, like the ones who climb Everest and all that. And again, I can't relate to that. I give them credit. And I guess people went in though with their eyes open though. And it's just sad, but again, I'm the opposite spectrum, like with Dean. I mean, I don't take these kind of risks, but we do need to, on a serious note, to really try to regulate it even more. Other than, look, when I had my colonoscopy, I had to sign off like, this might happen. To me, that was a big stretch. But for that, it's really, but people wanted to do it. Their eyes were open. And it's just really sad that it happened.
That's good to know. I've never done a colonoscopy. I did the poop in the box.
Oh, those are the worst. Colonoscopy. You should get a colonoscopy. Everyone needs to get a colonoscopy.
No, but if you do the poop in the box, the color guard thing. Yeah. So I did that. And I sent it in, and I'm fine recently. Like, so my doctor said, because there's no history in my family, thank God. He goes, you don't have to get the test. He goes, in these days, unless, so poop in a box. I'm like, what? Poop in a box? He goes, color guard. So I got it. It's kind of awkward. You hand it to the UPS guy and he sees it. We all know. You don't even like.
You should add that to your stand-up bit. That's hilarious.
You don't even like eye contact. Just hand it like, here you go.
Yeah, right. It's not for me. It's for my friend.
Yeah.
No, but to me, that's more awkward, Dean, because the colonoscopy, they put you out. So you're not aware of it there. It's like, hi, here's my The
Well, I'm
friends
not
come
like
and give
no one watches me poop in the box.
Well,
I just do
hopefully
it.
not. That's true.
It's just a weird thing. So it reminds me of Judy Gold. Judy comes out a lot. She has a great joke about the January 6th attackers pooping in the
Oh yeah.
in the Capitol. He goes, "How do you plan pooping like that? I mean, nobody. Who are these people that can do that?" He goes, "So it's the neurotic sense." And I've toured with Scott so many years doing stand up for peace. I've become like Scott. The last thing though, Chanel, you mentioned James Cameron. I think it's when James Cameron's giving so many interviews today. And today he's really slamming the company. He goes, "Look, I looked at their plans and their design. I didn't think it was safe." But it was weird. Like he's the go-to because he did a movie, The Titanic, that was, and he went down there. But he literally said yesterday, "I'm struck by the similarity of the Titanic disaster and this one." And I'm like, the Titanic sank in the ocean, hit by an iceberg. How are these the same? I don't understand that part of it. But Chanel, what is your reaction like to go into celebrities like a director like James Cameron for his take on safety precautions of a submersible and then equating it with the Titanic, which sank in the 1900s, hitting an iceberg? I don't
Again,
understand.
I love James Cameron. He's probably one of the best film directors ever.
Sure.
Major respect for him. But again, and he'd understand this. Same like with me with reality TV. When I had my show, everyone was asking me for like advice in the medical field. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a lawyer. I'm a has-been reality star. God knows I can even barely, or they would say you're the Messiah. You're the example for the Jewish people. I'm no Messiah. My point is, you don't ask a celebrity for the Titanic, something that we've all been trying to wrap our heads around, including him for his movie, for advice like that, because he's just a film director. He's just a creator like all of us. He's just human. That's why I was very shocked that with this past accident, how there wasn't additional security because of what they knew about the Titanic, if they were going to see that site, you know what I mean? And him saying he dived in, I don't think he dived in as far as he's saying he is. Remember, these are actors and directors. They say things just to kind of like prove their point or their fact. It doesn't mean that it's factual, doesn't mean that it's right. So it's just a little dangerous to take also advice from what James Cameron's saying, having that as Bible, because what if he's wrong? You need to go to the experts for that.
You go to Cameron for lighting. Like, okay, how would you light this?
Right. That
okay, the submersible's going in.
Right.
And
how would you direct this? How would you film this? But
DiCaprio comes here and he's like, "Rose, don't let go," and Rose.
But
lets
not
go
how would
anyway,
you save these people from dying and drowning? And
I'm with you. I think it's a little weird that to go to him, like he was giving today in the BBC interviewed about like secure, like the precautions, the plan, and how you're supposed to build this submersible. I'm like, you made Avatar. Okay, stop it. Like this is not like.
Didn't he go to other people for that? If like his responsibility,
he went down. He said he went down like 30 times, but he didn't design the sub to go down. He went in a very safe place. It's interesting. You're right. The idea of celebrity gives people, because you film the movie about the Titanic, all of a sudden you're the expert on submersibles that go see the Titanic. A little odd. All right.
And by the way,
his responsibility should be, hey, I don't know much because I just created the design, but maybe you should talk to this expert that I worked with on the movie, stuff like that. Be accountable as a celebrity and actually give it to the expert so that you don't look bad or you don't come up with false information to, prevent even further damage.
Why not go to DiCaprio? Because he went down and drowned with the Titanic. He might have more experience. He's like, "Oh yeah, I was Jack and Rose survived, but I went down and I saw it when I was dead. I went down with the ship, and now I can talk to you more." It's like we're going out to Leonardo DiCaprio, and the guys with the band. Scott, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was going to follow up with something you said earlier, Dean, that yes, the coverage was appropriate of this because it was tragic and gripping, but you're right. But, I do watch, because I have a lot of free time, BBC, Deutsche Welle, France 24. They do cover these migrant boats capsizing and all that. And that's a real failure of mainstream media in this country, that because they figure Americans aren't interested but we should be interested, and they don't cover. This happens all the time, 400 people on a migrant boat, all that. And just to know what's going on in the world. So I think that's just a failing of network news in general, which is so keen on just viewers. I mean, that's why I wish we had a national news company like the BBC that wasn't dependent on ratings, because it's gotten worse than it. And I'm a news junkie, but it's gotten to the point where I guess the only people who watch the 6:30 news are me and very old people. So, and I'm getting closer to that demographic. So, but it should have been all that other stuff should be covered too, as you said.
Well, I agree with you. So let's take a break and come back It's a huge brawl. Elon Musk versus Mark Zuckerberg, Lauren Boebert versus Marjorie Taylor Greene. Where's the submersible when you need one? So let's take a break, my friends, and come back and chat about the fighting between two of them and the potential cage match between the other two. And you'll have to pick who's going in the cage match and who's just fighting. We'll be right back with more of what just happened on the Dean Obeidallah Show after this. Ready? And we come right back. And welcome back, Dean Obeidallah Show. We're still live. It is Friday, June 23rd, continuing what just happened with Chanel Omari, Brian Wall, and Scott Blakeman. So there are two different battles. One's in the future and one happened on the floor of Congress. Let's do the one where I'm rooting for injuries. Elon Musk versus Mark Zuckerberg, that they might have a cage match. I'm not kidding. It started, Elon Musk was picking a fight with Zuckerberg because Zuckerberg, who runs Meta, is starting a Twitter competitor. And some weird thing, and whatever Musk goes, well, I'll fight him. And then Zuckerberg actually responds is, send me a location. And now Elon Musk said Vegas Octagon, where UFC, the actual Ultimate Fighting Championships happen. And they're discussing whether they're really going to fight, like these children. A 39-year-old Mark Zuckerberg, who, by the way, is a mixed martial arts expert, jiu-jitsu, and Elon Musk is nothing. And he's, in their early 50s and doesn't work out whatsoever. Chanel, in this fight between Musk and Zuckerberg, are you rooting for either one? And what does it say? They literally are going to be like school kids and trying to be alpha males, and they're going to fight now.
I got to be honest. I don't root for violence or two rich men who are trying to own the world to fight, because this is like major misogyny and ego. But if I had to root, I've been falling a little bit in love with Elon Musk lately. I just feel, because he just said something recently about how like he himself believes like even the things he's done has like damaged the world. Like I like people who take accountability for things.
Wow.
And,
So he's
and that was kind of powerful, because you never see him take accountability.
Thoughtful Bond villain. So he's the thoughtful Bond villain.
He's a thoughtful Bond. And I feel like he's a little bit of the underdog. So you want to root for him. Exactly. Like, we all know Mark Zuckerberg has this, karate background or whatever, even though he's a fellow Jewish, mate, and I should be rooting for him. But I don't know. There's something about Elon Musk. I think he would kick his ass. I would like to see him kick his butt in the ring for some reason.
If I could talk to Mark Zuckerberg before fighting Elon Musk, I'd be like, sweep the leg, Mark, right off the bat, sweep the leg, Karate Kid. I don't like Elon Musk at all. I mean, Elon Musk has made me like Mark Zuckerberg. That's how screwed up this nation is.
Wow.
Brian, what's your reaction to this? Just the idea of these two doing this on Twitter and escalating this to make it a headline story in their own little world.
Here we are with more rich guys with a lot of hubris, thinking they can step into the octagon and not hurt themselves. These athletes train their whole lives to be able to do this. These guys are going to tear the quad before they even touch gloves. This is so goofy. And it's another thing where we as a globe are going to be fascinated with this, because we're like, are these guys going to hurt themselves, or is their money going to cushion them again? We just wonder. You really do. And at this point, gosh, I hope they both just fall over.
There's too much, Scott. I mean, we have to finally say there's too much billionaire on billionaire violence. It's got to be addressed.
Oh, yeah, it's out of control. Well, actually, a more interesting cage match would be the Zuckerberg's roommates, who he cut out of all the money from Facebook.
The Von Winklevoss?
That would have more intensity, I think, if they all were.
Is it the Winklevoss twins?
Winklevoss twins.
Yeah. Two other rich guys. I mean, they're really rich. They made a lot of money like in crypto, I think, afterwards. It's insane.
Yeah.
The world.
Or it'd be funny to have Army Hammer, who played one of the twins. Actually,
he played both of the twins.
He played both of the actually in real life. He eat Mark Zuckerberg's head in real life, like a cannibal that they're accusing him of. No, but that would be crazy. That would be
there's a story. There's a reality show that would be a comeback for Armie Hammer. So, Scotty, what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say, I mean, it probably won't happen because these guys, kind of wimpy in general, and but the real one I look forward to. I don't want to jump ahead here, but to Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene, because they're doing it on the House floor. They're not even doing it in in Vegas, and that's sort of. I mean, a part of me says, why should I even be thinking about this? But then again, I realize I waste a lot of time during the day thinking about other things I shouldn't be thinking about, so I shouldn't preclude that. But they're all lowlifes, really, in a way. And almost to your point, Brian, I mean, just because being rich, I don't want bad things to happen to them, but there's this this elevation we give to the rich. Like, why is Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg any different than Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert? I think, in a sense, they're all lowlifes. Yes, the two of them have a lot of money, and but they really don't have that much talent. Really, they've succeeded on the shoulders of other people. And I don't know Zuckerberg personally, and maybe he's a nice guy. I don't know. Elon Musk annoys me, but all these people, it's unfortunate that we don't spend time exalting the people who are doing great, wonderful things and writing great theater and doing great stuff like you do, Brian, and everything, and instead of like the horrible people. But that's just the nature of how it's always been, I guess.
That's the problem with society.
And this show, apparently, as well.
No, you rise above that.
So Chanel, team Marjorie Taylor Greene or team Lauren Boebert? And just to set it up, they fought. They had a. I'm not even kidding. I'm setting this up for people so we understand where Republican and their leaders in the House caucus. Marjorie Taylor Greene raised the 5th most amount of money of all Republicans in the House last election cycle. She raised millions. So what happened is Marjorie Taylor Greene had first wanted to impeach Joe Biden, and then Lauren Boebert introduced the same resolution. And so Marjorie Taylor Greene said, "You copied me." And they had a fight on the floor where Marjorie Taylor Greene called Lauren Boebert a little bitch. And now we know it's confirmed by Marjorie Taylor Greene. She did call her that. So this is what's going on between members of Congress. There's only 435 in the entire country who are in Congress. 2 of them are yelling, "You copied me on the impeachment of Joe Biden. Forget the substance of it." And then they call a little bitch. So here's where we are. And you were on a reality show. Is this the kind of stuff that reality shows just dream of?
This is a producer's dream for any politician, any reality star. That's why a lot of times they make docuseries on politicians, right? Because they're the best reality stars. Like Donald Trump, you love him, you hate him. He's the best walking reality star because as a reality star, they want that rawness from you. They want to show that you're not perfect because these 2 women in Congress are just like us, the human. They're like me. I called someone a little bitch on my reality show too. And by the way, I was raised by modern Orthodox Jewish parents that I could never say a curse word. So again, you're human, you make these mistakes. And I think with reality TV, yeah, it's a producer's dream for people to go out and say what they feel. Sometimes you can't articulate an emotion, right? She probably felt angry at the moment, like you're being a little bitch about it, which by the way, I don't think there's anything wrong with society tries to silence us too as a culture with reality TV. Like, oh my God, I can't believe she said that. Like, what's the big deal if you're calling someone out for who they are? To me, I've never understood that situation. I think we need more of that. And by the way, also, we have to remember, like I've told you before, reality TV is a business. Even with the Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk and these 2 women, they all know it's a business at the end of the day. They're geniuses as business entrepreneurs. That's what they've done. And that's how they've like taken over the globe. So to do a fight, they know publicity wise, they're going to have America by their toes, whether you agree with it or not. And that is going back to Brian and Scott's points of like the rich, we're hyping and we're feeding into the rich. And as a society, we need to kind of stop this BS. It's a bunch of nonsense,
But also we have to stop treating Congress like a reality show. And frankly, I think
they did it. They were the ones that did it. It wasn't
no.
Of course, right. We do go out there and do that. They're the one that call each other names.
No, I agree. But I don't think it makes women look good or it's a good thing for a woman to call someone a little bit. It's the same way there's a trend now in Hollywood to have more films where women behaving badly, just like guys. And to me, that's not a great step forward. But anyway, first of all, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert are actually dangerous women, dangerous people. And it doesn't matter. That's the least of it that she's called her a little bitch because she's a white national or white supremacist. She talks about Jewish space lasers. She talks about, you will not replace us, which is the great anti-Semitic trope. And meanwhile, Marjorie Taylor Greene is the most replaceable person on the face of the earth, and Lauren Boebert, who hopefully will lose. So I know it's fun to hear it. And you're right, though, Chanel, that it is smart of them. Because they didn't look
sad. It's not.
We're all talking about
cool.
it, but they're dangerous people, and I hope they'll be silenced eventually by losing re-election.
I hope that too. What about you, Brian? Are you team MTG or team Boebert? Is there a team?
I feel like if no weapons were allowed, it would be MTG. But Boebert, isn't she the one that carries the guns into Congress? I mean, how long is it going to be before one of these nut jobs pulls a pistol?
So you're saying we have to go Alexander Hamilton, Aaron Burr on this?
I mean, it's
Go to Weehawken, New Jersey, and just have it out 10 steps, and whatever happens, and they can write a musical. What a lot of words rhyme with green. I mean, that's kind of an easy musical, right? You're a mean one, Marjorie Taylor Greene. You got a song right there. We open up. I could open with that, and then we move into you're the musical guy. I mean, what else? What else? Bobart. That's tough to rhyme with. Bobart,
yeah, I don't know about that one. Maybe and Lauren
Bogart.
isn't really that easy to rhyme with either.
Lauren, yeah, Green is so much easier. So you can do MTG. You can rhyme with that. We need Lin-Manuel Miranda. I'm going to see if we can find him to do some kind of Marjorie Taylor Greene the musical. Big hit, folks. All right, so let's change it. Let's talk about someone that I think a lot of us like. I can't speak for all of us, but I like President Obama a great deal. He just did a YouTube video interview with Hassan Minhaj, and who used to be on the Daily Show and had his own show, The Patriot Act, for years on YouTube. And this was really interesting that Obama, I'm going to read it so it's verbatim. He said he had this reoccurring dream that where I wasn't president, and they were some of my happiest dreams. He said he described the dream. I'd sit on a bench and suddenly I realized nobody recognized me. And that's the only thing that happened in the dream. I'd be sitting there chill, and I felt like I won the lottery. And I'm like, there's something, this is interesting. Meanwhile, all of us want to get recognized on a park bench. So what does it say? Scott, let's start with you. That Obama's dream, and it was a happy dream. He says it's reoccurring. That is it just about not having the responsibility of president, or there's the burden of fame? You're Obama, you're recognizable around the world, just an escape from this?
Well, first, I share your thoughts. I mean, to me, not only was he one of our great presidents, but I just, I wish I could just binge watch everything he said those 8 years. He's an incredible person too, and I'd love to meet him. But I do empathize with what he's saying, and I joke about it on our podcast with Tom Saunders, that yes, a huge part of me is lamenting, why can't I be more famous? Why can't I do this? But then again, I'm sitting at EJ's Luncheonette on the Upper East Side the other day on a table, and just my friend talking, and if I was famous, every single person coming by would say something, and I'd like that for maybe 6 years, but after that it would weigh on me. But so I do understand that. I always wonder that, even forgetting just being president, now he can't do that. He's got all his, so it seems like a simple thing, but just to walk into a place and get a coffee, just like we take for granted, and not being able to do that. I mean, you know, it's a trade-off. I mean, I'm so glad he did the 8 years as president. It was great, but I can understand why he, part of him wishes that he didn't have that.
Brian, what about you? I mean, Scott would take fame for 6 years. Is there a number of years that you would take fame for? I mean, like 3 years, 2 years?
Oh,
do you want to
man.
be, would you like to be so famous that your dream is to actually not be famous?
To me, just enough to own a house in LA. I could take that. That's all I need.
Interesting. So that would be your level of fame, is just to acquire some property. And then,
I mean, I'm a millennial. It's out of reach for us. So like anything to be able to own a house in the United States as a millennial, heck yeah, I'll take it.
Chanel, what about you? I mean, with the reality show, you're certainly probably famous within the community of people who watch the show. You're maybe even your community as well. Was there good to this? Was there a bad side to it?
So, yeah, like I had 15 minutes of fame, so I can only imagine Barack Obama, like still now, he's still famous. I get where he's saying the piece, because at one moment when everybody knew me and like wanted to take a picture, or if I was sitting at lunch with my family and I just wanted downtime, as much as I love fame and I strive for fame and I want it, because everyone does, right? It makes you feel important. There's a point where you have it and you realize you took the little private moments for granted, like that coffee with your friend or that lunch with your sister, that now you can't even have a private moment. Because a lot of times when I was doing that back in the day, and when we were so at a hype, by the way, also still now, because Newsday came out with like a piece on like the 10-year reunion, and people started like around my building, like, hey, I just saw the piece. It's nice and great, but then you forget, like, wow, privacy really is freedom. And that you forget about, and you appreciate it as you become more famous. Now I get why famous people want the privacy more, even though they signed up for it. It's something that's yours and no one can take away from you, you know?
That's interesting. And also right now you could be like, do you know who I am? And they're like, who? Like, here's Newsday right here. It says
right. But then it's like, people don't know who I am. They're like, who are you? And that's also—
what was the name of the show again? Because I don't want to screw up the name. I know it was about
Princesses of Long Island.
The Princesses of Long Island.
You guys can check it out to make yourselves feel
No, I remember. No, I remember it. I remember when I first met you and talking about it, and I looked it up, and I knew I was going to mangle a name. I didn't want to give it the wrong name.
Yeah.
So we got a few minutes left to talk about people who are not getting the attention they deserve. And some of them we know are the Writers Guild. I had on Rama Youssef on a week ago who he created his own show, Rami, and co-created Netflix show Mo, and talking about the real fundamental issues of the strike. But we just hit the 50-day mark. And I'm wondering, is it not getting attention? I try to think back to 2007 and 8. Life's a blur. But it seemed like more people talked about it because late night shows were off. And at some point, the late night host went back without writers. It was a big deal. And I think in a way, the fact that we have YouTube now and streaming platforms that weren't there is taking away the sense of urgency for this strike. This thing could go for a long time. So Scott, what about you? I mean, the sense that unless it's on Instagram with some friends who are striking and they post videos, it's not getting press at all. And I really think there was more press then because it was more part of the landscape of our lives. There was no Colbert, there was no Fallon and that kind of stuff. Now, like, okay, they're not on. I can watch a million things on Netflix now. I can watch YouTube. Hassan Minhaj is out doing a show on YouTube right now because there's nothing else going on.
Yeah, I mean, and I do remember watching in like the Daily Show, so when they came back without writers, and you really got to appreciate what, as great as Jon Stewart is, without writers, it's so noticeable. But I think it's, in general, look, if you look at it from a cynical point of view, the networks are owned by the same companies that the Writers Guild is going in negotiations with. And you have Disney and all these people who want to cut the writers' salaries and make them sort of have a per diem thing. I mean, it's very hard to be a writer right now. In the golden days in the 70s, 80s with sitcoms, you would have 22, 26-week seasons and you make a lot of money. And it's changed. Even to get on a prestige show, it's still 10 episodes and you're finished. So the minimum, I mean, if you look at the WGA, I think the average salary is like $250,000, which is a lot, but people go through huge downtime. So I think labor in general is not covered that much in the mainstream media. It's great that you're bringing it up, Dean. And I think it will if it keeps going on or, if, God forbid, impacts the Emmys. But this is going to be a big strike because the whole, as you said, the fact that streaming is so big, that's why it's so important to the writers. Because I was talking to a friend who, and this wasn't even streaming, this was with cable, which was even different, where he had to write and direct a show to make the same money on cable that he could make on a network just by writing it. So it's very hard for writers in general. And then, of course, with AI looming, and that's a whole other thing, which is a huge issue because people are already talking about at least writing first drafts with AI. So this is going to go on for a while because I think this is bigger than 1988, which went on for, I'm not sure how many weeks that was, but it was
right around a long time.
Quite a long
2007, 2008 was the last one. That was like 100 days. Brian, what about you? I mean, do you think the fact that there's so many other entertainment places to find your fun and your comedy that it's actually hurting the writers on some level because we don't feel the the studios are not feeling the urgency?
No, definitely. And then also look at the globalization of entertainment. Squid Games is one of the most popular shows of the last couple of years, and that's a Korean show.
Right.
One of my favorite shows on Netflix, Kunk on Earth, that's a British show. And these networks, they have massive libraries of content that they can buy from outside of the United States. And so that's another thing that they're looking at. I think the thing that will start to tip things is I believe that the Screen Actors Guild will start to go on strike next month.
That would be huge.
That
would change it.
This is, a major canary in a coal mine for our upcoming labor struggle as a country. We're going to see every single bit of workers devalued, because they're trying to find more ways to automate things. And I don't know how much you've played with that AI chat GPT, but boy, it does a lot. And it's really easy to cut corners with this thing.
Certainly. And by the way, the first half of this segment was hosted by AI Dean. Wasn't even me. So, Chanel, at last minute here, what are your thoughts? Do you think the writers are going to get a good deal? And do you think the fact there's so much on the opportunities for entertainment there that it's hurting the writers' strike right now?
Listen, I've been a writer for talk shows too, and for shows and movies, and it's tough. I think the problem is that the studios have the money, they have the power, and they want to set boundaries. And what I think the problem is they were hiring way too many writers at the same time. In order to cut costs, if you want to cut costs and be fair to the writers, keep on like maybe 6 main writers and give them their fair share. And then you have other networks, other platforms, you can put the other writers in those spots. Like, be smart with how you're handling it if you don't want to spend all that money. But writers do deserve upgrade, and they do deserve, because you're keeping these writers all night in the rooms, 24 hours sometimes, or 18 hours a day, and they deserve according to law. So I agree with the strike. I agree that we have to do more publicity wise to bring attention, like what you're doing. I think we all should be going on social media and pushing and advocating, for more money. Because if we don't, I think because of the streaming platforms, there is no sense of urgency. And that's the problem with podcasting, with Netflix, because Netflix can really, they don't even need the writers, then right now they could just have producers produce. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be a great show without writers, but I think we just need to do more as a society and stick up for our rights, because studio heads are never going to see what we see as writers.
No,
and
I
producers.
agree.
It's not.
And Brian makes a great deal about globalization. So we're out of time, but Chanel, if people want to follow you real quickly, where can they follow you?
Please follow me at Chanel Omari, at Chanel in the City podcast. Every week we have a new episode up. Please follow me at the All-Star Comedy Show. We have a show tomorrow night in honor of City Harvest. We try to raise some proceeds. Portion of the proceeds go towards City Harvest to end hunger in New York City. We have a fabulous lineup of comedians. It's a great night out at the Grizzly Pear, thegrizzlypear.com. Get your tickets and follow me there. For every month we have a comedy show. We got to get all of you on that show. That'll be a fun time. So
Thanks,
thank you.
Chanel.
Thank you for having me.
Brian, what about you? Where can people follow you? And again, where they get that album that just came out today?
Oh, you can follow me on all platforms at Brian Wohl. And you can get the album wherever you get your music, Spotify, iTunes. And man, I don't even know if they make physical copies. I'd like one if they have it.
That's right. It's all streaming. And Scott, what about you, my friend?
You can find me at Scott Blakeman, Scott Blakeman 5 on Instagram. And twice a week, I do Getting Through This with Tom and Scott podcast with Tom Saunders. So you can find that everywhere. And it's always fun to be on the show, and great being with all of you today. It was just a lot of fun.
Thanks, guys. Thank you so much. We're going to take a break, come back with more of the show.